If you have just joined us, you are watching Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The biggest line to come out of that is that a midnight ceasefire, ceasefire to come into effect at midnight, has been announced for Idlib province in northern Syria. So Hashim, what did you make of what came out of those talks? There is a ceasefire. I mean, do you think this one is any more likely to hold than the previous ones we've seen?
Well, I think what they have achieved today in Moscow is quite significant for the time being, because until a few hours ago, there were huge concerns that they might come up with an agreement about a ceasefire, because fighting flared up a few hours ago in the city of Recep with the Turkey-backed rebels pounding government positions in the city. But this is quite a crucial moment for the two key players, Russia and Turkey. I mean, you can hear from the final communique by both leaders that they remain completely divided about Syria. President Vladimir Putin was very critical of a key faction group in the opposition, which is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, describing it as a terrorist organization and justifying the actions of the Syrian government as legitimate and blaming HTS for all the problems in Idlib province. On the other hand, when President Erdogan was talking, he was saying that Assad is to blame for the offensive in Syria and in Idlib, and is to blame for the displacement of 1 million refugees on the border with Turkey. And I think they decided for a moment to set aside those differences about the narrative and agree on the three terms of the ceasefire. What is significant about that is, Kim, is that particularly the idea of the safe corridor along M4. Why M4? Because it links Latakia to Recep, and both countries will be conducting patrols along the way, north and south, which means that this is going to be a pivotal moment to prevent the Syrian army from crossing that M4 into the city of Idlib. So I think from a Turkish perspective, this is quite an important thing. I think the delicate task facing the two countries in the near future is, will Russia on one hand be able to rein in President Bashar al-Assad's forces, who have been saying in the past few days that they are adamant they will continue their push to take over the city of Idlib and the province, which is the rebels' last stronghold in Syria. At the same time, will the Turks be able to rein in the Syrian factions who have lost significant territory in the past few weeks and who seem to be adamant at the same time that they would like to claim back those areas, because when they lost those areas, hundreds of thousands of people are stranded now on the border with Turkey.
It was interesting what you mentioned there about the M4 and M5 highways. I mean, I'm thinking, how long can this truce ceasefire, particularly around those strategic highways, how long can that continue? Because like you said, Bashar al-Assad's forces, they want to retake all of Syria. I mean, how long can that hold?
Well, I mean, from today, I mean, when you look at the choreography of that announcement today between Erdogan and Putin, you get the impression that these are the two key players who hold the keys to any permanent solution to the crisis in Syria. Everyone else has taken a backstage position, from the EU to the United States of America. Since 2017, Turkey and Russia decided to set aside their differences and team up. And that was very instrumental. It paved the way for the first Astana agreement in 2017. That paved the way for the demilitarized zones in Idlib. And then 2018, the observation post and the safe corridors. And on October, last October, the Russians and the Turks agreed on the area that stretches from Tel Abyad to Ras Al Ain, which is in the northeastern part of Syria. So you get this indication that the Russians and the Turks will definitely have a bigger say in shaping the future of Syria. Kim, however, when it comes to the permanent solution, to the political solution to the crisis, the two countries have different narratives. President Bashar al-Assad has called for parliamentary elections in April. The Turkish government says that's not legitimate. It has to be under the aegis of the international community, and the opposition should be included in those elections. But when we change the whole framework, including drafting of a new constitution and rewriting the whole political establishment in Syria. Russia, on the other hand, backs President Bashar al-Assad and says this is something that has to be decided by the legitimate authority in Syria, being President Bashar al-Assad. And I think the two leaders do understand that for the time being, they'd rather maintain those recent gains, particularly the ceasefire to be announced midnight, and leave the talk about the political settlement for another opportunity when you have all the elements conducive to a genuine political solution that will end a conflict that has been going on for now 9 years.
Hashem, there have been some Turkish losses, significant losses, as far as the Turkish people are concerned. How do you think this ceasefire announcement is going to go down in Turkey, among the population and also among the politicians, because they have been very divided?
Well, if tonight there was no announcement, there was no deal, that would have put massive pressure on President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, because once back here in Turkey, it will be extremely difficult for him to convince the people about the rationale behind sending troops into the province of Idlib. But today, with that announcement that the Turks have managed to, and this is basically what they have been saying over the last few days, they have been saying that our aim is to convince Vladimir Putin to give us a safe corridor, a demilitarized zone, and also a ceasefire to be implemented. And they got what they wanted. Now, Turkey keeps saying that the reason why it sent troops in Idlib was for two reasons. First of all, and this was repeated today many times by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he said that the Syrian government was launching a tactic in northern western province of Idlib, not necessarily just to make military gains, but his ultimate aim was to push those displaced Syrians to cross into Turkey, and then Turkey will find itself grappling with millions and millions of Syrians in its territory, and that's why they had to send troops on the ground. Number two, they say that they are pretty much concerned that the offensive that was launched by the Syrian government would create destabilization across the area on the border, and for them, it was instrumental to move in and to secure the border with Syria. And I think this is something that resonates among many people. Now, it remains to be seen. We have to wait and see what happens from midnight. Are we going to see some of the Turkish soldiers redeployed back into Turkey? Are they going to maintain their position? How are they going to talk about those observation posts? And is the general sentiment in Turkey receptive to the idea of maintaining troops in Idlib for as long as it takes until there is a final political solution that would put an end to the civil war in the country?